What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Evolve Radio with your host here, Nathan Barna. I think that's the name that's going to stick. And heads up, I'm happy to announce that soon we're going to be transitioning to a podcast format instead of these videos, because I know how much you guys love to see my face and hear me talk, but that will also give me more of an opportunity to bring guests on, bring other ideas on, create more long form content so that we can really get deeper into this stuff, and so that you guys can get other perspectives and other ways of viewing many of these topics that I've been discussing so far, as well as obviously continue to provide you guys with more and more content. So that being said, today's episode is titled, "The Truth is What Works." Now, that's a quote that I got from Laird Hamilton. At least I believe that's where it originated from. Obviously not like a very complex quote, but very powerful with its implications. And really what I wanted to dive into today with that is that our ideas of what the truth is, I feel are largely created or manifested by what we hear other people say is the truth. And I've kind of implied this idea many times throughout these videos, but it's basically saying that as a culture, as a whole, obviously not every individual, but as a whole, and if you look at different structure stages of consciousness, something that I've recently been studying, Ken Wilber's The Theory of Everything is a resource I'd recommend for that. And I believe he has a whole institute that he created. I think it's called the Integral Life, if you guys wanted to look further into this. But basically saying that around 70% of the population is in the traditional stage of consciousness. And basically what that means is 70% of people are in that stage of consciousness where they are looking for some kind of authority figure to tell them what to do. This is where a lot of people get caught in that religious dogma where, maybe they're looking for some father figure in the sky, or some idea of some almighty being that's going to take care of them and or punish them for doing things and partaking in things or having thoughts that are outside of the agreed upon rules and regulations of that belief system. So with 70% of the population shown to be at that level of consciousness, it's no wonder that we are seeing what we are seeing today, where the majority of the population is blindly following and believing what some guy in a white coat says, or lady with letters past her name says, or what the news says, and what social media says, and what their friends says, and basically giving their critical thinking skills out to everybody but themselves when it comes to drawing conclusions about what is true and what their reality is. And the reason why I titled this "The Truth is What Works" is because a lot of times what we think of as truth which is usually a product of what we are believing in that somebody else has given to us. And if you just, pay attention to the thoughts that you're having throughout the day, I want to say 68,000 thoughts per day, I think is what the research shows. But if you pay attention to those thoughts, and if you're honest with yourself, you might come to recognize that the majority of them, potentially, most people, if they're honest with themselves, would say about 95% of them aren't actually their own thoughts. They are thoughts that have been given to them willingly or unwillingly, that they're choosing to think and choosing to believe in. And so if you, kind of logically think about the implications of that, if 95% of the thoughts are not our own, and the thoughts that we repeatedly think help to dictate our words and our actions, which create the reality that we're experiencing, then 95% of that is a reality that somebody else has given to us, if you draw the conclusion from that line of thinking. So the truth, really, what we think of as the truth is usually subjective. And that's not to say that there is a one all-encompassing truth of reality, because that's something that we still don't know of yet. But the truth at a subjective level is what's true for you. The truth is what works. The truth is what is working for you. So if you are believing in things that are creating thoughts, that are creating words and actions, that are creating the experience that you're having, and that's an experience that you don't want to be having, maybe you're unhappy with how you look, or you're unhappy with your current circumstances, or you feel that you lack love in your life, or you're not having the relationships that you want to be having, and the list goes on and on and on, how people create these realities for themselves that go completely against what they say they want for themselves, and then tend to blame that reality on some external source and not take that personal responsibility for the experience that they're creating. So again, if you are not having the experience that you say you want to be having, then what is your truth? And is that truth serving you? In other words, is the truth that you're giving to yourself, that you're believing in, is it working? And if it isn't working, then it may not be the truth. And this is where you have to have the courage to open yourself up, open your mind up, open your heart up, and maybe allow yourself to look into other possibilities. Flip the coin. If the news and social media and my friends and these doctors are saying one thing, are there people saying something different? Are there people on the other side of that coin? And the majority of the time, there are people just as equally qualified and just as credentialed on the other side of the coin. It's just that usually what's on the other side of the general narrative that goes against the one that we're given through our mainstream media is contrary to that belief system. And so it is intentionally silenced, and there are forces that try not to let it become exposed. And through that bias just in itself, because we have a bias where if we see something repeatedly, like if you search on Google, for instance, and you see you see something pop up as the first result, and then maybe you see that same answer to your question or same viewpoint repeatedly pop up, automatically your assumption is that because it's ranked high and because you're seeing multiple sources, regardless of what those sources are and who's funding those sources, automatically you're assuming that that thing has more truth than the alternative, because the alternative isn't as evident in the places that you're looking. And that in itself should give you a hint as to what the truth really might be, and potentially if there are people or organizations that don't want you to know a certain alternative viewpoint, then maybe they might have a motive to work with companies like Google and like Facebook to make sure that you don't see that alternative viewpoint. So again, I'm not telling you what's right and what's wrong here. I'm simply trying to inspire you to potentially look outside of your current box of beliefs, especially if those beliefs aren't creating the reality that you want to experience, and see if there are other truths. And again, those truths are subjective. See if there are other ideas, see if there are other beliefs that do help you create the reality that you want to live. And obviously, you can get more scientific into this, and there are plenty of studies. Again, there's equally credentialed people on both sides of the majority of these polarizing subjects that we are faced with today, whether it's mandatory vaccinations or wearing masks, or even abortions and politics and long list of things. Then you have to decide for yourself, after looking at all possibilities, what conclusion is going to be true for you, based on what conclusion is going to work best for you to create the reality, create the experience that you want to be having in your life. And for me personally, I choose to believe things, because again, this is where you have to realize that there's a two-way street between what reality is and what we believe reality to be. Because what we believe in creates our reality, and our reality reinforces our beliefs. Obviously, to some extent, I can choose to believe that, pink pigs are flying everywhere, and I can believe that as much as I want, but most likely, because collectively that hasn't been accepted as a reasonable possibility, my power of my thoughts may not have as much of an experience, as much of an impact at a collective level to make that a physical reality, even though I may be able to make myself believe that strongly enough to potentially hallucinate that vision. So again, there's a two-way street. Your reality, so what is actually true, is going to help reinforce your beliefs and vice versa. But again, I choose to believe in the things that are going to create the best experience for me. It's things like, eating organic food, drinking clean water from clean sources, taking control of my breathing and paying attention to my breath, and not putting a mask on to inhibit my ability to take in a full breath. And things like trusting in my body's natural ability to respond to whatever potential threats and viruses and bacteria that could potentially harm it by giving it the resources that it needs to do so. Getting to bed at a certain time, waking up at a certain time, and aligning that circadian rhythm, aligning my sleep rhythm with the natural circadian rhythm of our planet. As you can see, you don't have to have these radical beliefs like pigs are flying, but a lot of times these beliefs might not be things that are the consensus norm. And so even though they are very simple things, and if you think critically, they make sense, if they aren't accepted widely, you could have a problem and you could run up against opposition, and there could be people telling you that those things are wrong. But again, if by believing in those things, you find that is a truth that works for you, then that is your truth. So I hope this makes sense to you guys, and I hope you can see the implications of thinking outside of your current box and looking at all possibilities. Even if there's 100 people, if they're not having the experience that you would like to be having by saying what they're saying and believing what they're saying, maybe it's time to look at those 3, 4, 5 people that are saying something different but are having an experience closer to what you say you want for yourself. That's it.